Why things going to space launch straight up? In my head it makes more sense to have something like a space shuttle take off from Earth like a normal plane would and then just continue to climb into orbit gradually. Maybe that would use way more fuel, but like the SR-71 flew at what, like 70k feet or above. How much harder would it have been to get it into orbit, or even out of the atmosphere completely? Orbit is less about altitude and more about speed, as stable-ish low Earth orbit is 17,500 miles per hour. You can't go that fast in the atmosphere without some really extreme hypersonic gas physics happening. So rockets go straight up first to get away from the air and then roll over to boost up to orbital velocity in a near vacuum. This is exactly what Virgin Galactic's Spaceship One does. Taking off on a plane has two advantages. The first is additional horizontal velocity, but not much. And the second is lower air resistance. The benefits are fairly limited though, and it only works for small rockets, as even the largest planes ever built can't come close to carrying a typical medium-lift orbital rocket. Typical rockets take off vertically, but begin to move more horizontally as they gain altitude. State Route 71 is something like 1/20th the altitude of the ISS, and 1/8 the speed, so ~160 for the kinetic energy per unit mass. Rockets spend most of their delta-v accelerating sideways. They only go up at all so they can get out of the atmosphere, and have enough time to build up the sideways velocity before they fall back down into the atmosphere. Do an image search for long exposure rocket launch to see the kind of path rockets follow, also called a gravity turn. You can use a plane as the first stage to launch a rocket into orbit. But you have a tiny fraction the payload capacity. Just because planes aren't big enough to carry the size of rocket, you'd need to get a multiple-ton payload the rest of the way into orbit. Wings and air-breathing engines are just dead weight once you get to space, which is where you're gaining most of your horizontal velocity. The Earth is very large, and the atmosphere is very thin. If the Earth was the size of an apple, the atmosphere would be the thickness of its skin. Since it takes a huge amount of force to move something into orbit, it would be more trouble than it's worth to get the required fuel and rocket components flying them to just launch everything from the ground. Basically, rockets don't care enough about flying through a bit of atmosphere enough to worry about getting on a plane to get past some of it.to a 5-year-old who knows details about the State Route 71. That plane was already doing its best to fly that high, and had to be specially designed to do it, where the atmosphere is already getting very thin. That said, that's only about 1/4 of the way to what we call the edge of space, and 1/16th of the way to the altitude at which the ISS orbits. There's a reason the State Route 71 didn't go higher. The atmosphere wasn't thick enough to provide enough lift, and its engines were air-breathing, not rockets. So even if they could have powered up higher on engines alone, those would also have quickly run out of air to burn. The correct answer is that this is a faulty assumption. They don't go straight up. Ultimately, orbit is way more about sideways velocity than height. It's the ultimate implementation of the Hitchhiker's Guide definition of flying, throwing yourself at the ground and missing. So to achieve orbit, a rocket needs to go sideways stupidly fast. So why not just go sideways from the beginning? Turns out air is thicker down here, which 1, wastes energy to cut through, and 2, at high enough speeds, will turn your rocket into a flaming arrow because of friction. Also, the rocket does need some height, or it will slam into buildings and mountains and stuff. So rockets launch in a way designed to get a decent amount of their height first, spending as little time as possible in the thick air, then slowly pitch over as the air gets thinner to start accelerating sideways. If you haven't, you should play Kerbal Space Program. When you launch from Kerbin, the Earth equivalent, you need to get a lot of altitude before pitching over. But when launching from bodies without an atmosphere, you can basically go horizontal as soon as you're high enough to clear terrain.
Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next exciting video.